All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for joining us today. This is going to be some just-in-time training for you to help you manage your students' grades within WebAssign. My name is Bridget Hales. I'm a Regional Customer Success Manager. Have the absolute pleasure today of having Dr. Dale Dawes. He's one of our Cengage faculty partners, join us. So Dr. Dawes is from the City University of New York, the Borough of Manhattan Community College, and he teaches really quite the gamut in mathematics. So developmental math courses all the way through calculus, as well as finite math and statistics. So we're so happy to have Dale on board today, and he is going to be monitoring the chat, and also will jump in for some of his best practices as well. So welcome, Dale.
Thank you, Bridget. Looking forward to it.
Yes, we're so thrilled that you're here. We do have some other people that will be monitoring the chat. So if you do have questions along the way, or there's something that you need answered, feel free to put that in the chat or the Q&A as well. And I'll let them go through that and pause us if we need to. All right, so you'll notice at the bottom of your screen, you will see the Q&A and the chat. So you can go ahead and submit questions to Dale and I. And then if you, there is chats if you need to interact with your other colleagues, and you'll see that there is a drop down for host and panelist and everyone. There's also closed captioning, so you can either keep that enabled, or you can hide that if you need to. And for our learning goals today, so we're hopefully, after this training, we want you to be able to understand WebAssign scoreview, hopefully learn a few new things, and really be able to track and analyze how your students are performing. So you'll manage WebAssign scoreview. We're going to talk through the gradebook as well. And some of you might have different LMS gradebook needs, so we'll talk through that. Also, you do have some ways to communicate with your students from within WebAssign, so we'll show you some of those tips. And then grade sync functionality within your LMS. So some of you might be integrating with your learning management system through Blackboard or Canvas or Moodle. Where we won't have the time today to really dig into that, but if you do have questions or you need additional assistance, you do have your local account executive, as well as there's a local version of me. So please put that in the chat, and we'd love to follow up with you and make sure you get everything answered that you need to. Also, if you're integrating with your LMS, you do not have to set up a gradebook within WebAssign. Certainly, it's something that you can do if you want consistency in WebAssign versus your LMS, but it's not a requirement if you're going to send over your scores through your LMS. So the gradebook setup is really beneficial for those that aren't using your LMS. Quick agenda. We do have a lot to cover, so I'll try to keep it slower pace so that we can go through, but I do want to make sure that we get through everything and then leave some time for Q&A. So we're going to go into a live tour of WebAssign. We're going to look at scoreview. We will look at the learning management system, grade sync, just what that might look like. For those of you who might already be using it, you're going to be familiar. If not, just know that that's available, and we'll take a quick peek at that. We will go through what a gradebook setup in WebAssign looks like. The training resources, you've got a ton of those, so we'll show you that. The All Access Hub, and then again, we'll leave time for Q&A, and there'll be a survey link for you as well. All right, so let's jump into WebAssign here. I'll stop sharing my screen for just a moment. We'll get up everything here. All right. So I am in WebAssign right now. Is everybody able to see my screen there? Dale, are we good? Okay.
Yeah, I can see.
Perfect. Awesome. So hopefully this looks familiar to you. So I am in a WebAssign course here. And what you can do is you could just go into one of your courses, and in your class view itself, you're going to go over to your class tools, and you'll see that you've got scoreview over here. So when you click in scoreview, and hopefully this is a view that maybe you're familiar with, but it was really designed for you to be able to quickly see your students' progress and identify those that are doing great, maybe those that really need some extra help and they're falling behind. This view is going to show you just the raw scores. And so it's not going to capture if you do any kind of grading rubrics or calculations that you might do in the gradebook. This is just meant to show you those raw scores. So once you pull up here, you're going to see your score view is going to show you all of your students that are enrolled over here. And by default, it's just going to show you your current students. You do have the ability to drop that down, look at maybe drop students, or if you needed to look at everybody. And then also by default, it's going to only show you your current or recent assignments. Again, if you wanted to show your past assignments or all assignments, you can certainly do that as well. So it'll show all of your students here, and then you'll see a time. Keep this in mind. This is going to be a time that your students are working through. Now, some of your students might have worked on an assignment, got up, grabbed some lunch, came back, and they still had WebAssign open. So just keep that in mind, that the time may flex a little bit. You'll also see your total percent right through here. And that's going to show you how the students are performing overall. And then if you have any points that are going to be available right through there. So that's going to just give you a quick overview. And then you'll see on the rows over here, these are going to be all of your assignments. So what we're going to do is go through each of these little tabs, show you some of those options that you have available for you. And I love this view because you can actually grant extensions and submissions right here. So if you click on that, it's going to open up. And the nice thing is that it's going to pull in all of your students. So if you were, for example, going to change the assignment for everybody, you would want to go ahead and just do that in your reschedule assignments. But if you need to give certain students or maybe multiple students an extension, you have this view and you can grant extensions to multiple students at once, which is really nice. So you've got your calendar right here. You can type in manually or you can pull up your calendar. How many submissions are you going to allow them? And then if you're doing any kind of penalties, you can put that in right here. So I love that you can just scroll down, especially if you're doing multiple students or maybe you have athletes in your course that there's a game that they need an extension for. You can put that right in there.
And Bridget, if I may interject.
Of course.
When I'm granting extensions or I'm rescheduling assignments, I tend to like to use Mozilla Firefox because that browser has an extension called Fox Replace. So currently you have highlighted December 27, 2022, 11 a.m. With Fox Replace, I can search for all of those dates. And then once I search for those dates, I can replace all of them at the same time. So the extension is called Fox Replace, and I use it with Mozilla Firefox. I'll put it in the chat.
Awesome. Great tip. Thanks, Dale.
No problem.
All right. So there's your extensions and submissions. Nice, easy place for you to be able to do that in one scoop. I'm going to go back here. And you've also got the next button here is your downloads button. And so this is really helpful for you to be able to generate a report. Maybe you just wanted to look at the overall scores or you wanted to see actual responses. You can click on responses and you can either look at their first response or depending upon how you have your assignment set up, maybe you allow 3 submissions. So you wanted to see how the students responded to each one. So you've got some flexibility here. This is really helpful if maybe you need to pull up grades to do like a midterm report or something within your department. This is a quick, easy way for you to be able to do that right there. All right, and email selected. So you can actually sort your total percentage. So maybe you are week 3 or week 4 into class and you just want to get an overview of how students are doing. If you click on total percent, you can sort highest to lowest. So these are your top performers. Maybe I need to work on my students that need a little bit of extra help. You can sort through the percentage. And I'm going to invite all of these 3 students right here to come to see me during office hours. So I can select these 3 students and then click on email selected. And then the nice thing is students have no idea who you've sent this to. It's just going to go directly to them from you. So you can put your subject message, your subject here, put your message in, and you can even send yourself a copy of that message and just invite the students to come see you during office hours, or if you have a very targeted message that you want them to hear, you can put it right here. So great way to be able to communicate directly in WebAssign with your students.
And your copy of the email tells you which students you sent it to, and they can reply directly to that email, to whatever email address you as the instructor associated with WebAssign, whether it's your institution's .edu address or your main email address. Awesome. And Bridget, if I may, you mentioned downloads before. So there are many different functionalities for downloads. For example, if I'm doing a study of a bunch of courses or a bunch of sections afterwards, I can easily download an Excel file or a CSV file to have the data there. And I started using WebAssign in 2009. All the data is still there and available for download.
Wonderful. So that gives you the ability to really compare and look at different sections as well, or maybe what you did a previous semester and how those grades have been impacted or changed. So that's great. This is one that often is overlooked because it looks collapsed and hidden. So I just want to touch on this show analysis right here. So this will expand and give you an overall view of how the students are doing. So it's going to show you the raw scores. So how many points, how many scores are being analyzed right here, the mean, the median, standard deviation, and minimum and maximum. And you can also take a look at percentage if that's easier, or you prefer the percent right there. So that's just something that's also really helpful for you to look at as well. So I'm going to collapse that back there. This is perhaps one of my favorites. So on the right-hand side, you'll see class insights. So this is something that I think a lot of students really don't even know that it's available. But then I also talk and work with a lot of instructors that don't realize the value of class insights. So I always like to touch on this, but it aggregates students' questions and their performance by learning objective within your textbook. And so this gives you a clear understanding of the topics that students might be struggling with. And I think it's really powerful because it not only looks at if a student answered a question correctly, but when. And I think that's the critical part, especially with learning and understanding mastery, because so many times, how many times are you hearing, oh, I did great on my homework, I got 100%, and then I didn't do so great on my test. So this will help you as well as your students determine how they're doing. So for example, we know that mastery on the first attempt versus maybe the third or fourth attempt is quite different. So this will allow you to really look at detail on that. So I think that's really helpful for those students that might need extra preparation. So this will give you some visual indicators here that you might have some topic areas that might need some work, or you're doing, classes got that. They know how to multiply whole numbers here, but not so great at subtracting. It might be at risk. So this will give you an overall, and then you can actually drill into, let's look at this one right here. You can look at overall how the class is performing with some visuals here, but then you can look in and drill into the actual question. So you can see the question, but then this gives you a little bit more data. So I think this is pretty powerful, and a lot of people use it maybe before you go into class. You can look to see how they performed on homework. So this first attempt, you can see all the students that actually got it right. So it's giving you the percentage, but then the specific students who got it right on the second attempt, because sometimes you don't get it right on the first, so you move on to the second. But if it's taking them 3 or more attempts, they may not be understanding. So this will tell you how many got it correct on any attempts, so 3 or more, who never got it correct, or who didn't try it. So I think just really valuable resources for you there. The other thing I like to point out is that you can flag topics, but you can also search by a particular student. So if you needed to search for a student, maybe you have somebody that is in office hours, or maybe somebody that's asking you for extra help, you can see how they're performing. Now, your students on the other side also have their own personalized version of class insights as well. So they know where they need to focus, how they did proficiency-wise, if they got it right on the first or second, or if they needed some extra help.
Bridget, would you mind opening Student View so we can show everyone where their students can see class insights?
Of course.
And while you're doing that, I find that there's so many resources available to help our students in WebAssign, but we simply need to show them. So our students could be motivated enough, but they might not be self-directed enough. And pointing this out at the beginning of the semester, and not specifically the first day of class, but after you've had at least one assignment, I think you should point out View My Class Insights, and do this a couple of times over and over just at the beginning to make it a part of their common practice, so that they'll look at it on their own. And there was one more comment that you made that was extremely important. Can you go back to the instructor's perspective in that first tab, scores?
Sure.
So the first tab on the top, I think you're still in the student perspective.
Yep, let me get out of it.
And then you went to class insights there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from this perspective, you mentioned a common complaint. You know, students are doing homework assignments and they're saying they do well on the homework, but they don't do well on the examination. Well, the students have a plethora of learning tools, videos, master it, practice it, read it, practice another version. And even now they have learners, but on a test, they don't have any of these learning tools. So one thing that I do is I make sure to give my students practice exams, multiple practice exams. And I format at least one of those practice exams like the way the test will be formatted. No learning tools, no ability to submit a question one at a time. And that way, when the students are in a testing environment and doing that practice exam, they can get a better picture about how they're going to perform. Now, how does that relate to class insights? Before, you were showing individual assignments. So if I, as the instructor, look at my practice examination, and then I can see how many students got the question right on the first try, on the second try, or how many students didn't even attempt it. If I do this well before an examination, then in the next meeting, I can work on the questions that my students are struggling with. I don't have to guess. I know 100% what questions they need to work on.
That's awesome, Dale. I love that idea. And it's a great tip, especially to prepare them in the beginning to get them used to practicing for that test or for that midterm. So
absolutely. And
great
it works whether it's a paper examination or an online examination. Either way, that practice exam and combining that with class insights can be a powerful tool to help our students excel.
Awesome. Great advice. So that gives you an idea of class insights, a quick overview on that one. And we're going to jump back through to talk about the assignments. So this is, again, we're still within the score view right here. And you'll notice that each of your assignments listed is going to have, it's a hot link. So you can click on that. And that's going to give you some powerful data as well. And some of this you might not be familiar with, or maybe you've never used it. So I want to click touch on that. So for example, there's points right down here. So if you click on points, this is going to give you a nice histogram as well of your scores for this particular assignment. So that one will give you an overview there. And then a couple of the other things, either along here or along here, are great answers. So maybe you do show my work, or maybe you have some questions that are open response or file upload. This is where you'd actually grade those answers. And so you can grade if you've got certain questions or you're grading all, and then you can just start grading. And you'll see what your students have uploaded or what they've input. You can just put in their score right here. If you have a comment that you want your students to see, you can put that there, and that will actually save their score as well as their comment. So that is all built in. And then if you're going, you can go to your next student, or you just can select next right there. It's a really easy way to utilize if you're showing my work and you want your students to use that.
Bridget, we did have a question come up about downloading scores. So is there a way for an admin account to export grades for a particular test, like a midterm?
Yes, so you could certainly export out grades. There's a tasks tab right here, and you can do download manager. And you can pull in the course that you're in, and it'll actually, if you click on scores, it'll download everything for you there. And then you can sort to which particular assignment you might be looking for.
So the course coordinator would likely have access to that as long as the permissions were set in a certain way.
Yep, if the course coordinator needs access, they would just need access to that course, and then they would be able to go in and download that data.
And follow-up questions, do you have to do that per course?
So can I take that, Bridget?
Yeah, of course. I know how much you are familiar with that. Yeah.
So I used to be the developmental math coordinator, and I managed about 234 sections. So I can speak to WebAssign from an administrative perspective as well. So absolutely you can. Now, it's dependent. If the admin account creates the courses, then the admin account automatically has access to all of the courses. So when the admin account wants to run a report or wants to pull some data, that admin account can pull it for every course that it created. including the courses that semester and maybe a specific trigonometry or intermediate algebra course. That admin account can pull the data for everything. Now, there's a caveat here. Some instructors create their own course because they get so comfortable with WebAssign. Instead of using the master course created by their department and shared with them, they use their own course that they have customized. So in those scenarios, all you would have to do is give the admin account access to those individual instructors' accounts. And as long as, not accounts, but courses, and as long as the admin account has access, because we can share access to courses with instructors from all over, they don't have to be within our institution, then that admin account can pull the data. So again, for the instructors that are creating their own course, what they would have to do is simply grant the admin account access to the, and then once the admin account has access, the administrator, the coordinator, the chair, or committee can pull the data, whoever has access to the admin account. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
No problem.
All right. So we'll go on to, we talked about grading answers. Let's go now to summary. So this is going to give you an overall view here. So this is going to show you just in general the questions and a summary of how these were answered. So for example, we have 2 here. Let me see if I can give you this right here. So it's going to show you what percentage of students are answering which question. So it's really great to just see that kind of rolled up in one, and you can quickly see the numbers over here as well.
So I use the grade response summary all the time, especially when I was teaching face-to-face. The first thing I would do is I would go to class, and I usually would have, say my class started at 2, either the assignments due at 2:10, maybe 2:15, 2:20, and I would jump and look at the grade response summary, and I will be able to correctly anticipate exactly what questions we need to talk about. And even if I need to give my students more time because everyone got one question wrong or no one even attempted it. The only drawback is how long the assignments are. Not that it can't analyze it, it would just take longer to load, depending on how long your assignments are. But I use it all the time.
Nice. All right, so that was our summary button. And then next we're going to talk about when you click on a student score. So if you are here, you're looking at the student score right here, or if you're looking at their percentage, either way is going to open up a box for you. So if you click on that, and it's going to give you your adjust score window. Really helpful if you are just looking at some scores here. Maybe you needed to add a penalty or you wanted to add a bonus. If you wanted to override their score completely, you can do that right here. Or if you needed to excuse an assignment for a student, you can do that here as well. So really helpful information, especially if you needed to go through and look at an override score.
So I use this as well, especially when I'm grading examinations. I require my students, and I test on WebAssign. So not only do they have to submit the assignment, they get a preliminary grade, but I require them to upload a PDF of all of their handwritten work. I use an app or I tell my students to use an app like Cam Scanner, it's free, or Genius Scan. And once they've uploaded their work literally inside the assignment, when I go over it, I can either change the score for that, or I can look at their work for the entire assignment and give them partial credit right here. And I can add bonus points. And I even note to myself, okay, here's why I added bonus points, or here's why I removed points.
Awesome. Yep. So really, we're trying to make it very simple for you to be able to go to one place to get an overview of how your students are doing, but then you've got a lot of functionality within scoreview that you can use as well. Other thing that you'll notice while we're here is the rescore button. So the rescore button, if you have changed anything, and you'll see that this one, it's telling me a rescore may be necessary because I've changed either questions or assignment settings since this has been scheduled to my class. So what that means is that most likely I've changed questions, but I possibly have students that have already worked on this assignment before. So it's going to highlight which questions are or have been changed. So I can either just rescore those, I can rescore everything, and then I can either do the last submission or the best submission for the student. And then I can choose to do that to my current students or all of my students. The nice thing too is that, as Dale mentioned earlier, he had 234, 243 sections. You can actually rescore just this particular section, or if you have multiple sections, you could do it. Now it is going to be student by student, so it might take a little while depending on how long you have your assignments through, because it's going to go through everyone. But it's nice that you can either do it by the section or by all of your sections there.
Absolutely. And one thing about this is, let's say I gave a quiz or a test. And once I looked at the results of the test, I realized one of these questions weren't fair. I didn't prepare my students enough for this question. So what am I going to do? What I can do is I can change the value of that question. I can make it 0 and make it a bonus question, meaning the students that were able to get it right, they still get credit. But the students that got it wrong, it doesn't hurt them. So after I've made that change on an assignment that's currently live or on an assignment that's just past due, I go and I click the rescore button and it adjusts accordingly. And this is also the same thing to do with the show my work. You by default, show my work is worth 1 point, but maybe you want it to be worth 5 points. And you decided that afterwards. All you need to do is click rescore assignment. And if you know exactly which question it is, just rescore that one question. And then you'll be fine. And this also, there was a question in the Q&A. I believe it was Ann Simpson, because we talked about overriding scores. And Ann asked if we can override the score on an individual question. It depends. If that question is a show my work question, then yes, we can. For example, Bridget pointed out grade answers for questions where you have to upload something or write an essay, or the students simply have to show their work. And what we can do is, for those assignments or for those particular questions, we can change the score right there. We can make it worth more than it currently is worth. We could make it worth less, and we don't have to just use integers. We can, instead of using 1 or 2 points, we can use 0.5 points, 0.8 points. In those scenarios, you can change the point on a question level. However, if they're not a show my work question, then you're going to just have to override the entire assignment. And that's where Bridget clicked the override button, and I will put notes on the bottom of why I'm giving them points or why I'm taking away points. So just in case my students and I have to have a conversation afterwards, then we do. And we can talk about it directly. One powerful thing that I was able to do face-to-face is when my students would test and we would be in a computer lab, they'll test on WebAssign. They all had equivalent tests, but different versions. And I would give them a paper in which to write their work. As soon as they submitted their test, they would be able to see their answers and the correct answers. And hopefully they were the same. In those scenarios, at the end, I encourage my students to review that examination and write on the back any question they wanted me to go over, any question they wanted me to look at for partial credit. That drastically increased the time or reduced the time it took for me to actually grade the test. And it also helped the students be reflective, because sometimes they'll look at questions and they'll say, no, professor, I just got it wrong. I don't deserve partial credit. But the idea of them looking over their work is extremely helpful, but it has to be within context. If it's a test that students are taking any time during the day, you don't want to release the answers before all of your students took the test. So I can't necessarily do that on a test that I have due 11:59 in an asynchronous class, but I can do that in a face-to-face class, or I can do that if the test is synchronous. Hopefully that helps.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. So we're still in the view right here, and you can actually, let me go back to, I'm going to click on, this is our overall, and I'm going to click on a particular student. So let's see.
And while Bridget was doing that, if I may, Bridget, could you go notice that everything that she was hovering over in the score view turned blue, and anything that's blue on WebAssign, we can click on. So from the score view, you can navigate just like Bridget showed you to many different other, navigate to other pages. So again, anything that's blue, you can click on.
Yes, great point. Thanks for bringing that up, Dale. So I am in a particular student right now, and you can see all of the assignments that they've worked on. And what I love here is that you can see their responses as well as the log info. So if you click on responses, this is going to tell you how this particular student is doing, how they have. So this one used 2 out of 10 submissions. You can also see that there's previous answers. So if you wanted to see each of those submissions, you can see that. So are they on track? How did they answer the first submission versus the second? So it really helps you gauge their understanding of their own work as well. And then showing you per question for each assignment. So that's really valuable feedback. The other thing that I love, and students sometimes are like, I had no idea you can pull that in, but there's a log info as well. And this one is really powerful because you can see where this was downloaded from and when it was submitted. So you can see which IP address they downloaded it from, as well as where it was submitted. So really powerful data for you, maybe to encourage or discourage collaboration, but that gives you a lot of information right at your fingertips if you need it.
And if I may, Bridget, during the log info is essential. When we moved to distance learning because of the pandemic, I helped my institution manage the testing, especially for the developmental courses. And when we were doing that, my student, not just my students, but my colleague students would email me. And if they would, I would basically function as the testing department. And sometimes we know they can have issues taking a test. Maybe something happened to their computer, you know, maybe they lost internet access. So a situation that has nothing to do with the test itself, it's just an access issue for our students. And we have to show them grace. However, we know that some students can take advantage of this. So how do you know which students to help and which students are just trying to take advantage of the scenario? Well, log info definitely helps you with the discerning, because log info tells a story. So if a student tells me, unfortunately, my internet cut off around 8 p.m. and I'm checking the log and I realize, oh, the student's working, saving the questions, and around 8 p.m. it went blank, then I can easily believe that student and I can work to help that student, versus a student that tells me something else, but the log info contradicts the story. I like to tell my students that it's like Big Brother. We can see what you do, we can see when you do, we can see how long it takes for you to do it. So there's no reason to lie to me. And I tell them that from the beginning, so we can not waste time, just get directly to it. And most of the times I am able to confirm a student's story. I am able to help them, even if it's not my own student, even if it's a student in another class. And then once I can do that, WebAssign allows you to grant extensions. WebAssign allows you to increase submissions. It allows you to help that student any way that student needs to be helped.
Awesome. And if I'm going through, so maybe I'm looking at this particular student, I want to go on to the next, I can look at Shauna. So Shauna's here. Let's see how Shauna's been performing in her class. So let's see. So this one, she's not downloaded this one yet. So, but you can go through and look at other students or a particular student and just look at their responses as well as their log info. And then you also see, so we've gone through all of the little tabs here. You'll also see add other scores to the gradebook. So if you click on that, this is really valuable. So maybe you take an attendance score, or maybe there's, you know, other assignments that you would use outside of WebAssign. You can go ahead and add in your scores to your gradebook right here. So maybe you want to add a single assignment, or if you have a file that you wanted to upload, you can certainly do that, and we'll give you guidance on what you need for that file. So really powerful to have everything in one spot for you. And you can go ahead and add external scores as well.
And Bridget, is there a way to download all of the assignments for a specific category like homework?
Yes. So when you go, so if you could go here in downloads, but ultimately, if you go to tasks and download manager, you've got a couple different options. So if you go here, I'm in my course and I go to scores, it's going to download everything, but then you could sort it as well. So you can go to your assignments here. If you've got your current or past, it's not going to let you sort like homework or test per se right here, but you could download it and then filter. Then you can put everything right here. Yep. All right, let me get back here. So that's just a analysis of ScoreView, a lot of great resources that I hope you were able to learn something from there, because there's a lot of valuable buttons. And as Dale mentioned, you can click to a lot of different things. So you can really capitalize on what you might be looking for and drill into the level that you're needing to. I'm going to go back. Oh, I'm sorry, Dale, go ahead.
So Bridget, you were talking about clicking on grades and then adding a grade to the gradebook.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, this is a very useful feature, and you can use it to create dummy assignments. As I stated, I test on WebAssign, but sometimes I'm teaching courses that have departmental examinations, and I'm not controlling the test. The testing department is controlling the test. In those scenarios, I get the grades from the testing department, or maybe I'm giving my students a paper-based test. And all I can do is simply input the grades into WebAssign. I can upload an Excel sheet if I have one, or I can just enter the grades for a single assignment. I use this if it's a paper midterm, paper final. I use it to take attendance. I even use it to give my students credit for participating in a Kahoot. For example, many of us use Kahoots or Kahoot.it. So it's so we can play games and increase our student engagement. And what I would do is I would tell my students, just for participating, you can get 100%. But for those of you that do the best, you can get bonus points. So in the chat, I actually sent a link for an article where I explain how I use it for attendance. But the method that I use can be expanded and extrapolated on. So you can use it for multiple things that you do in your course. So the student can actually see how they're performing and encouraged to work harder or encouraged to engage more. And some of these different categories that I'm talking about, if you can just click on assignments and click on my categories, you'll see that we can create any assignment category we want. So anything that you want WebAssign to keep track of, or anything that you want to appear inside your WebAssign gradebook, you can just enter the category here. That's how I did the attendance. That's how I did the Kahoot. That's how I did the practice exams, or the paper midterm, or the paper final. Whatever you need, you can create that category. And once you create it in your account, you don't have to recreate it. It just exists.
Awesome. Yep. I love that article too, Dale. So you said you put it in the chat already. Awesome. That's great, because I think so many people are looking for creative ways to do things and engage your students and maybe take attendance with WebAssign, and didn't even realize that you could easily add that in. So thanks for that. I'm going to go back here. Let's see. Let me stop sharing my screen real quick and show you the LMS side of things here. All right. All right, so let me show you what this looks like here. So for those of you who might be using your LMS or learning management system, there's a lot of different ways, depending upon which one you might be using, of how to get to what we call the content selector to show you where you can actually link and create gradebooks columns. And we do have training videos. I think they're going to put them in the chat for you to be able to watch through if you need to refer back. We do have your local team, of course, that will help you as well. And but once you get to your content selector, you will see arrows on the left-hand side, or boxes on the left-hand side there, that you can simply just, select those, and those become deep links within your learning management system. So depending upon which one you use, you could put them in modules, or you can put them in assignments, wherever you prefer. And then you can actually, over here, you'll see that you can have a gradebook column as well. So when students complete that work, those assignments will then come over into your LMS automatically as well. It's a really valuable resource. I know Melissa was on here, so Melissa's had lots of practice this semester with that one. So it's been really great to be able to use and understand how your students can engage through the LMS as well. If you have any specific questions, or there are some things that you need additional training, just if you could put your name in the chat, we'd love to follow up with you directly as well. All right, so let's go in and talk about, so this would give you just an idea of if you're using your LMS, what you would do. Now we're going to go through to set up a gradebook. So let me go back into WebAssign here. And what we'll do is we will go on how to create a gradebook. And it's very similar. So you're going to go to Grades and Gradebook. It's that time of year where many of you are getting ready or thinking about your taxes. And it reminds me very much of like a TurboTax. So did you buy a new house? Do you have any new dependents? We're going to ask you a lot of information here, but it's really going to be a great guide for you to be able to walk through what you want. So you'll select your class. And the nice thing is, as you're building your gradebook, you can actually use these same settings for other semesters. So imagine if you're creating, you have 4 classes even that you want to set up a gradebook and utilize it at other sections, you certainly can do that as well. This one's already set up. We're going to pretend it's not. So we're just going to click on the wizard. And what it's going to do is just kind of walk you through it. So we're going to specify our gradebook settings now. You also have the ability to import settings from another class. So if you've done this in a previous semester, or you did it, in another class, you can import those same settings, or you can use your own spreadsheet as a gradebook. Dale, go ahead.
Yeah, so I do that all the time. Once I've set up my gradebook, I just import, and I make any changes afterwards by you clicking on settings, but it saves me so much time. Honestly, once you have it set up, especially at the beginning of the semester, I could literally recreate, duplicate my class 10 minutes before class starts and have the gradebook and everything up ready to run. So it's a great feature.
Awesome. Yes, time is definitely of the essence, I know, with all the things that y'all are doing. So I think it's really critical if we can save you some time and proficiencies using the gradebook like this. So within yours, and Dale, I know you've got lots of good tips and tricks for this one, so feel free to interrupt me as we go. But I know we're going to just kind of walk through some of this with you and give some best practices here. So it's going to ask you which assignments to use in calculations, past due only, or all assignments. A lot of times people will do past due assignments only, so that way it's only calculating the assignments that have been due. So if you are a super diligent instructor and maybe you have 30 assignments, but it's going to calculate all 30 assignments unless you do past due only, students might panic on the second week of class if they're seeing Fs all the way through. So you might do past due assignments only.
So Bridget, you have a wonderful point there. I always encourage instructors to use past due assignments because, again, if you're using all the assignments, students aren't going to see the Bs or the As until the end of the semester. But if you click on past due assignments, the students are going to get a constant progress report, a snapshot of how they're doing at that moment. And that can be used to motivate students. And that can be used to encourage students to engage in self-regulated learning. So past due assignments is always recommended. And the thing is, another benefit of seeing their current performance, including assignments that they didn't do, including assignments that they got a 0 on. It's showing your students an accurate picture, as opposed to some other systems and some other grade books gives the students false impressions, meaning there are 15 assignments. The students completed 5 out of the 15, and the 5 that they completed, they're averaging a 90. There are some grade books which show the students that they have a 90%, but that's a complete false impression. And unless the instructor knows to look further, they may underestimate how much work that student needs to do. So I prefer it this way, and I would concur with you by using past due assignments only.
Awesome. So automatic update, this is going to update your gradebook automatically. You can pick the time. It can be, 3 a.m. or you can do it right before class, and you can pick the day. The nice thing is if you get into class and your gradebook updates at 1 a.m., but you want to see, students might have been really diligent and working. If you have class at 11, maybe at 10:57, they've submitted their homework, you can just simply go into your gradebook and click update and see the most recent. So never fear that you're not going to have your latest data. You will, but this is nice that it'll pull up automatically for you in the gradebook. And these are your categories that you would include in your gradebook. If you simply don't have a lab, you just select no. If you don't do any of these, you select no. You can add in a category. So remember this attendance that I just created, that's in here. So you can, if you don't use it, just hit no. And if you needed to add a category, it's right here for you as well. And so you can choose if you want WebAssign to calculate a final grade, or if you would like to do that, you can do that as well. So I'm going to go to next. And you can either specify the weighting of each category. For our purposes today, I'm going to skip the weighting. So that would mean each category is worth the same number of points within all of the assignments. But if you wanted to weight each category, you certainly can do that as well. I'm going to skip for now. And then this is just a reminder, are these all of the categories? And if I realized, oops, I didn't need prereq, let me take that off of there. You can just simply go to next. And then this is going to calculate your category averages. So do you want them to be equal weights, or do you want them weighted by the points that are within each of your categories? So you can choose equal weights or weighted by points, whichever you prefer there. And then dropping assignments, and I might defer to Dale on this, but I typically recommend that you sort of wait to maybe midterm or finals, because you can drop assignments within each category. It's going to drop your lowest. So maybe you drop 2. WebAssign will not drop your assignments until you have at least 3, for example, assignments. But it may be beneficial for your students to get an idea maybe towards the middle or final part of the semester, but you can drop grades within WebAssign. So if you wanted to do the lowest 1 or 2, you certainly have that ability as well. All right, and then your grading scale, we do flex. We know we've got a lot of different departments throughout and a lot of different institutions that use different grading scales. We do have some that use a plus and minus scale, so you can put it whatever scores would be applicable here. If you do just a letter grade only, that's fine too. You can put your minimum scores here for that letter grade. You can just simply do a pass or fail. So maybe depending on the type of class you're teaching, it's just a pass fail. For our purposes, I'm going to say none to get us through this one, but know that you've got lots of flexibility when you're looking at your grading scales. And then this is what you're going to show to your students. So do you want them to see their final score and their grade? Some people show class average, some don't, just for encouragement or discouragement. So you can show the minimum, maximum standard deviation and histogram to your students. And then raw scores. So I'm going to clear everything. And then I'm going to add back in the average. So you can do, if you want them to be able to see the raw scores here. And then also, this is when they're going to see it. So are they going to always be able to see that? Or is it only after the due date or never? A lot of times by default, it's only after the due date for a lot of professors, simply because they want students to go ahead and submit, and then they'll see their grades right after it's due, because maybe they have multiple submissions and they're not, they're still working through it. But you have flexibility to either do that always after the due date or never. Yeah, go ahead, Dale.
Thanks, Bridget. So you already mentioned it. We have to be strategic in which kind of descriptive statistics we choose to share with our students. So for example, if I'm dealing with a lower level class and it's the beginning of the semester, maybe I don't want to show the class average because maybe it's going to take 3 weeks to a month for the students to really get in the flow of the class and get to a point where they're doing the work consistently. So instead of showing the class average, I'll show the minimum and the maximum. The minimum, just in case the student is close to the bottom, they know that they need to work harder. The maximum as a benchmark for the students to shoot for. And if it changes later throughout the semester, then I'll show the class average. Now for a higher level class, maybe I'll show the class average much earlier. But what Bridget said is absolutely correct. We don't want to show the class average if it's low, because you don't want students that are doing poorly to say, well, I'm average, so it's okay. You want to give them a benchmark to shoot for, and also some turn on an alarm just in case they're near the bottom. So I would recommend minimum or maximum until you're at a point where the average is what you think it should be.
Awesome. All right, so I'm going to hit next. And then again, this is where you can apply it to this section, or if you have multiple sections, which this one I don't, but you could apply it to this section and all of your other 5 sections that you might have here. So if everything looks good, I'm going to go ahead and save these settings. And then I can go ahead and apply my update gradebook for the section. Now for me, I have my assignments due in December, so it's not going to show my grade. It's going to show me in scoreview, and it's going to show your students upon submitting, but within the gradebook, it won't calculate right here because I don't have it due. All right, so your gradebook is all set up. And again, you can navigate that if you've got multiple sections, and everything will start to appear here. And it's literally that easy. We just went through all the steps. If you needed to edit, or you say, oh, I need to add in a category, I need to change something, all you do is you go to grades, we're already in here, you go to gradebook and you simply select settings. And then you can go through and change any of the settings that we just did. So really great that you can update on the fly if you need to. If you need to add, change, update anything there. So very easy to navigate. And a lot of people do prefer the gradebook because it gives you so much flexibility there. Yeah, go ahead.
Bridget, can I share my screen?
Of course.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a de-identified gradebook. So just like Bridget stated, I set up my gradebook. I included my categories, and you can see how this student is performing. Again, this would be the student's name, but it's de-identified, and the student is currently getting a B-. Now, remember what I said, anything that's blue on WebAssign, we can click on. So if I click on the overall grade, you're going to see this pop up. Can everyone see it?
Yep.
And it's going to tell you the weights of the different categories, how much each category is worth. The final exam being the largest category, or we actually have, this is the real final examination. And so being the largest category, and the student can see how their grade is calculated. But in addition to that, let's say a student comes to me and says, Professor, I'm not doing well. Because when I show my students their grade, they get a constant update every day. And it changes the dynamic of the conversation. I no longer have to come to my students and say, hey, you're not doing well. Let's create a plan for you to do better. They come to me and they say, Professor, I'm not doing well. So I said, let's sit down and look at your grades together. So for this student, let's say we look at the student's homework grades. And I'm going to make it a bit bigger. I can see all of the homework assignments. Bridget talked to you about this before, that sometimes you can drop assignments. And for the assignments that are going to be dropped, the students are going to see a red asterisk. So my student can come to me and say, well, Professor, what can I do? And I can say, well, let's take a look at homework 5. The total is 55 points. You got 0. Let's work on homework number 5. Let's request an extension And you can set up automatic extensions so you don't have to approve it, or manual extension if you would prefer to approve it. I recommend automatic. And then that student can have a path to work and get better. They can see this from every single category. And Bridget also mentioned raw scores. So I could click on raw scores, but what I did was I already had it open for you. So raw scores takes a moment to load. And by clicking on raw scores here, I see every category. Notice I usually give the minimum and the maximum, but I don't give the average for every category. I'm going to hit expand all. And this is when I sit down with my student, or whether it's online or face-to-face. And we just literally take a look at what assignments they need to do and how they should approach it. On this homework 3 factoring, out of 16 points, the student scored 1. This is a prime example of something that student should request an extension on. And once they actually utilize it and the system updates automatically the next day, the student sees the benefit of changing their actions. The student sees that by regulating their learning, they can actually get better. And it's a powerful feature. Now, there's more that I can talk about, but if there are any questions for the particular gradebook, feel free to ask now, especially in the Q&A. Shauna, do we have anything gradebook related?
Yes, we have a few that I've been holding for you.
Okay.
So first question, with Canvas integration, is there a way to do weighted versus raw scores? Weighted instead of raw scores?
No, so I can take this one, Dale. We send over raw scores. So if you wanted to do any manipulation, it would need to just be on the Canvas side. But we're going to send over the raw scores for that within Canvas.
Okay. And then how do you change an ND or NS to a 0 if an assignment is past due?
In the WebAssign gradebook, it's automatic. So an ND meaning not downloaded, the student didn't even try to look at the assignment, or NS means the student looked at the assignment but didn't submit a single question. In those scenarios, in the WebAssign gradebook, it's automatic. They don't appear as ND or NS, they appear as zeros, and they get factored into the grade that way.
Right, and then for LMS.
Go ahead.
So for LMS, yeah, absolutely. We currently you have to change them to a 0. We're working hard with our developers to get that to do it automatically, but currently what you would need to do is change that in the score view to a 0, and then that will push over to your LMS instead of a dash that you might be familiar with now. But we're working hard to get that happening automatically. So fingers crossed and stay tuned. We'll give you updates on that.
Thank you, Bridget.
Mm-hmm.
Shauna, were there any other questions?
So we did have one more if we have time. So Melissa wanted to know, if we have a locked master course, can you show me how to export a singular exam from multiple sections?
So Melissa, when you say export, are you talking about downloading the data for yourself, or you're talking about sharing an exam? Because if you're talking about sharing an examination, well, what you can do is simply propagate it. For example, you can create a master course and then the instructors can copy it, or the administrator can copy the assignments to the different sections. But during the semester, maybe the midterm changed or the final changed, or you created a new practice test. In those scenarios, what you would do is simply add it to your master course. And then once you added it to your master course, you can propagate it to the courses below.
She says to download the scores from all classes to analyze, because she was the course coordinator that you answered the question for before.
Okay, so you can download it, but as Bridget said, you can choose what you're downloading. And if you're downloading the scores, you can download all the scores, but what you can do is simply put that assignment in a particular category. For example, if there's only one assignment in the midterm category, even though you have all of the scores for all of the sections, all you need to do is look at one column in Excel, the midterm. And if you want, you can associate it with the names. If you want, you can associate it with the sections, and then you can edit it accordingly. So I've done research using data from WebAssign before, and I would just, I would de-identify the data, of course, but I would separate the course, the section, and I would just look at the columns that I want. I didn't even necessarily delete the columns. I just delete the columns I wasn't using. I just focused on the columns that I wanted, depending on what software you're using. I hope that answered it. And if it didn't, I'm more than willing to sit with Melissa and we can have a one-on-one where I can show her exactly what I'm talking about and she can show me exactly what she's talking about. And Sean, if there's one more thing, this is an old gradebook. You can see the students' names are de-identified over here. And there's one point, this is a course where my students did extremely well. Now you can see all of the different categories I have, and automatically you can see the class average. But more importantly, I'm gonna click on more. And once I click on more, you're gonna see you're gonna see more than the class average. You're gonna see the median, the min max, the standard deviation. Now, even though this class did really well, meaning they averaged a 93 on their final examination that I did not give, that the department gave through the testing department, that standard deviation is quite large for me because I remember this class doing really well. Remember, I said anything on WebAssign, if it's blue, you can click on it. So if I wanted to, I can select all of my students. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sort by the attendance grade. If I click on attendance once, it sorts it from highest to lowest. If I click on attendance again, it sorts it from lowest to highest. And then I say, okay, this student, they got a 53 on their attendance or 63. Maybe that student was a WU. Maybe that student is an outlier and it's messing with the overall view of the course. So what if I just hit select all and I simply remove the top 3 students and I just click final or any category. Notice that the average changed, but more importantly, that standard deviation dropped. It dropped from a 10 to a 4.67. My point is you can use the gradebook to look at subsets of students, any subset. This subset were just the students that passed and attended on a regular basis. If I wanted to, I can simply focus on the students that are struggling and didn't pass. So it's an extremely powerful gradebook. You can get histograms, you can know about the performance, but we can talk about that later. And we want to thank you for your time.
Thank you all so much for joining. If you still have remaining questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A or the chat. We'd love to answer them. I know that everybody's time is so valuable, so we appreciate you hanging on. I think that last little bit was very helpful, Dale, so thank you so much. And we really appreciate you joining. I think Nancy had put a couple things in the chat about the All Access Hub now. So if you haven't joined that, please do. Great resources. You can win some prizes, and you've got some other peers that are joining that to help answer questions along the way. And then Nancy, do we have our survey link as well?
They will actually be launched into the survey once the webinar closes.
Awesome. Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you all again so much for joining. We really appreciate it. And we wish you a wonderful Thursday. Have a good day, guys.
Take care.
Thanks so much. All right. Thanks, Dale.
Wonderful
job. Take care. Bye-bye.